the doll that was alive. Hello, everyone. I'm here to share a chilling account of a haunted doll incident that occurred in Japan during the 1980s. This event gained significant notoriety because the doll reportedly displayed its supernatural powers on live television, witnessed by millions. However, many are unaware of the doll's true origins and the full extent of its malevolent history. The following is a comprehensive narrative of what truly transpired, recounted by one of the surviving victims of the doll's terrifying rampage, Mr. Junji Inagawa. He is still alive today, and several of my contacts in the Japanese TV industry have had the opportunity to meet him. For consistency, I will narrate this story from a third-person perspective. June 1978. It all began when Junji Inagawa, a scriptwriter for traditional Japanese plays, was working at a radio station. As he prepared for a late-night broadcast, he heard hysterical sobbing. Investigating the sound, he found a folklore singer in distress, being comforted by the director. The singer claimed that while one of his early musical works was being broadcast, he distinctly heard the voice of a female fan who had passed away a few months prior. Shrugging off the incident as another in a long line of seemingly paranormal encounters he'd experienced throughout his career, Inagawa finished his work and headed home. The director, however, was so unnerved by the singer's experience that he insisted Inagawa accompany him home. The two hailed a taxi, and everything seemed normal until Inagawa noticed a small girl in a red kimono repeatedly appearing on the street every few blocks. Though unnerved, Inagawa tried to ignore her. That was until the taxi stopped at an intersection, and the spectral girl levitated into the air, moving directly towards him. The girl's face was reportedly so dark and filled with hatred that Inagawa was transfixed, unable to scream. She passed through the car without harming its occupants and then vanished. Inagawa then realized that neither the director nor the taxi driver seemed to have noticed her. He was the sole witness to the entire event. That night, Inagawa's wife, who had already retired before his return, claimed she heard loud footsteps all night and inquired if he had brought a guest home. The next day, Inagawa received a new project, a theatrical play about a ghostly legend, requiring props and special effects, including a doll as the female lead. To Inagawa's horror, the doll was an exact replica of the girl he had seen that night. Every detail matched: her hairstyle, facial expression, and even the clothes she wore. Understandably, Inagawa was deeply disturbed but nonetheless took on the project, diligently preparing for the play. Initially incomplete, the finished doll was soon sent to Mr. Maino, a renowned Japanese puppeteer hired specifically for the production. However, when Inagawa visited Maino, he discovered the doll's right arm and legs were somehow twisted and broken. Maino informed him that they were beyond repair, despite all attempts. This marked the beginning of a series of unfortunate events, akin to a Japanese version of Tutankhamun's curse. Soon after the doll was completed, its maker vanished without a trace. The following day, the house of the scriptwriter who penned the play's dialogue burned to the ground. During the first rehearsal, Inagawa and the others couldn't even obtain an early draft of the script, yet they attempted to practice regardless. Mr. Maino, the puppeteer, was soon struck by tragedy. His dear cousin died under mysterious circumstances, and the misfortunes didn't end there. Rehearsals were plagued by accidents. Costume bags and lockers were inexplicably soaked with water, wigs spontaneously caught fire, and many actors sustained injuries. Remarkably, all these injuries occurred on the right hand and right knee. Inagawa tried to persuade the theater group to abandon the project after witnessing so many trusted employees getting hurt, but they pressured him to continue. On the day the play was scheduled to debut at noon, the actors suddenly found themselves unable to perform. Many were either inexplicably mute, as if their tongues were twisted, or paralyzed by an unseen force. The play was thus forced to reschedule for the evening. After the actors and other personnel finally regained their mobility, Inagawa suggested visiting local temples and shrines to collect magical charms and religious items to ward off whatever malevolent influence was interfering with their work. This seemed to have some effect, as nothing significantly bad happened throughout the afternoon, and the play finally debuted that night. Everything appeared normal until the last act, when the doll was to be placed inside a coffin. Suddenly, without warning, the doll's head, legs, and arms detached, and the stage was enveloped in a cold, misty fog. Inagawa knew he couldn't cancel the play so close to its conclusion, so they pressed on. However, Mr. Maino, emboldened by the play's commercial success, insisted they perform it a few more times. Despite Inagawa's strong objections, the theater decided to proceed. Tragically, Inagawa's father also died under unknown circumstances the very next day. After the theatrical run concluded, the doll was given to Mr. Maino, who took it home. A TV station, catching wind of the bizarre incidents, decided to interview Mr. Maino on one of their late-night horror programs. Maino brought the doll along, and this is when things truly spiraled out of control. An overhead light crashed down, stage curtains were ripped away by an unseen force, and Mr. Maino began acting erratically, conversing with the doll as if it were a real person. At this point, workers offstage began to suffer mental breakdowns, one by one, and many were injured during the live broadcast. In short, the entire TV show descended into utter chaos, barely making it to the end. It was also reported that many workers were so traumatized they resigned after this incident. Another Tokyo-based TV station also learned of the events and attempted to create a feature documentary about the previous live TV incident. They managed to locate the vanished doll maker, who was found hiding in the mountains, sculpting Buddhist statues, and tried to interview him. Again, numerous strange accidents occurred during this period, and the supposed interview never materialized. They did find and interview Inagawa, but then cameras and projectors began to malfunction, one by one, forcing them to use a 16mm camera instead. As Inagawa cleared his throat and began his story, they heard a knocking at the door, but no one was there. According to Inagawa, the TV station eventually ran out of funds for the show and dropped the project entirely, though the 16mm film reel is said to be stored somewhere in the company's warehouses. Inagawa took the doll to a psychic, who initially refused to see it, claiming she felt an extremely powerful evil presence emanating from it. She later agreed after some persuasion. Upon seeing the doll, she informed his stunned Inagawa that it was possessed by more than one spirit, the most powerful of which was the daughter of a restaurant owner killed during a World War II bombing in Japan. The girl had died from injuries to her right arm and leg. The psychic soon died under unknown circumstances as well. Before I continue this story, I would like to add some details. As I previously mentioned, Mr. Inagawa is one of the very few survivors of the haunted doll incident, and according to him, he will remember the doll for the rest of his life. As for how I obtained this story, the original narrative was already a famous urban legend in Japan, but its details were incoherent and fragmented. However, I have several friends in the Japanese TV industry, some of whom know Mr. Inagawa personally. One of them conducted extensive research on the doll, collecting a wealth of related evidence, including photographs of the original doll, tape recordings, film reels, and even old citizen records of the Japanese girl who supposedly died during the World War II bombing. He also interviewed many individuals involved in the incident, such as former theater cast members who worked with Inagawa, TV show hosts and studio employees, Mr. Maino's colleagues and family members, and of course, Mr. Inagawa himself. I essentially compiled all this information from my friend and organized it into a complete narrative. Again, I will maintain a third-person perspective for consistency. I would like to add a few more details about the psychic who died after viewing the doll. Supposedly, the psychic advised Inagawa to enshrine the doll before it was too late. This is apparently a traditional Japanese method of dealing with haunted dolls and other unsettling objects, placing them in a temple and worshiping them to appease any malevolent spirits residing within. A famous example is the Awashima Jinja Temple, a relatively well-known tourist destination in Japan, which houses hundreds of haunted dolls displayed to the public. These dolls reportedly receive haircuts periodically because their hair actually grows. Back to the topic. Inagawa asked the psychic to enshrine the doll for him, as he had endured enough of the haunting and wanted nothing further to do with it. The psychic reluctantly agreed, but when Inagawa returned 3 days later out of morbid curiosity, the psychic was already dead. He was informed that she had fallen into a coma almost immediately after Inagawa left her office, and doctors could not determine the cause. Within 3 days, she had lost 110 pounds and died of malnutrition. It was said that when she passed, her neck was twisted and contorted into an unnatural position, and a creepy smile, eerily similar to the doll's, was fixed on her face. After the psychic's death, Inagawa retrieved the doll from her office, but was at a loss for what to do next. He discussed the matter with Mr. Maino, and both decided that sending the doll to a temple was the best option. Inagawa hired a professional photographer to help photograph the doll, intending to show the pictures to a temple priest. All seemed well until the photographer, developing the photos, ran screaming from the darkroom. The photo wasn't of a doll. It was the little girl. Her face was sickly pale, her eyes extremely thin and completely black, her eyebrows and nose appeared artificial, and her lips seemed smeared with bright, thick lipstick. And her hair, it was so long it draped down to the floor. Mr. Maino decided to keep the doll at home until he could find another temple willing to accept it, as they could do nothing at that moment. However, it wasn't long before another very well-known TV station in Osaka approached Inagawa and Mr. Maino, offering to feature the doll on one of their horror programs again. Inagawa initially refused, but later accepted the offer after much persuasion from his friends, former co-workers, and Mr. Maino. This would be the last time the doll appeared on national television, and it was this incident that finally propelled it to widespread fame. Inagawa and Maino took a train to Osaka, where the TV show director met them at the station. On their way to the company headquarters, they made a detour to visit another psychic whom the director had invited to appear on the show. Upon sensing the doll, the psychic immediately told her guests that it was possessed by the spirit of a little girl, a powerful presence she did not wish to meddle with. She then pointed to an empty corner nearby and told Inagawa that the little girl was right there, staring at them. When they entered the studio at the company's headquarters, Inagawa kept hearing a spine-tingling, flute-like humming sound that he initially assumed was part of the show's special sound effects. The sound soon became irritating as its volume suddenly spiked, and Inagawa went backstage to complain. The workers there, however, told Inagawa they heard nothing. At this point, the director rushed in to inform them that the psychic could not come, as she had suddenly collapsed with a high fever and was now in the hospital. They immediately found a replacement, but when the second psychic arrived at the studio, his car was struck by a truck, shattering his ribcage, and he too was rushed to the hospital. Finally, the third replacement arrived without incident, and the show was prepped to begin. It was broadcast live to the entire nation. As the cameras whirred to life, Inagawa noticed someone hiding behind the dark curtains as they began to sway from side to side. Eventually, he could even discern the outline of a face on the curtains, as if someone was pressing against them. Inagawa leaped up and drew back the curtains, but there was nobody there. The director motioned for Inagawa to return and sit down. Facing the camera, Inagawa began to recount the tale of the haunted doll as the TV host, the psychic, and Mr. Maino took to the stage, with Maino carrying the doll. As they sat down, the host asked the psychic if he had sensed anything. The psychic promptly told Inagawa that a small child was sitting on his shoulder. At this very moment, phone calls began to flood the TV station. Viewers of the show had called to report that they had indeed seen a small child on Inagawa's shoulder. The TV host and the director were bewildered, as this was entirely unexpected and certainly not part of the special horror effects they had prepared. "The doll is alive," the psychic declared, "and she is dark, evil, full of hate." He then warned the audience downstage that they were in danger and hurriedly told them to move away from their seats at once.